Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another IEEE USA Livestream webinar, How to Vet a Company and Take the Right Offer. I'm your host, Jonathan Cho. This is the third and final webinar in our Job Search in 2023 series presented by three-time best-selling author and career coach, Elizabeth Lyons. For the complete series, you can check them out through the link we'll be providing on the stream shortly. IEEE USA's goal is to create programming that is valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. As such, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. We value your opinions and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and share your thoughts. Elizabeth Lyons is a three-time best-selling author with her latest book, Hear Us Roar, Unapologetic Women Leading in Corporate America, Making a Big Splash. She's also a coach, speaker, and consultant to the most powerful executives that keep corporate America rolling. Elizabeth's expertise is helping clients land a promotion, find a new job, or simply bring their leadership game to the next level. Elizabeth helps executives calm down and focus on what really matters, and together they end up with astonishing results. Without further ado, I'll now pass it off to our presenter. Welcome back, Elizabeth. We're very excited for what you have for our audience today.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that. So today we're going to talk about vetting offers. And I do want to talk about the market a little bit as well, and what you can expect, and also what I'm seeing on my desk this week alone. I will extend 5 to 6 offers. And what's interesting about talking about it real time, I can give you a little bit of feedback and understanding around what candidates are telling me and what hiring managers are looking at. And that's what makes these presentations so valuable, is being able not just to talk on the subject, but really talk about real time what's happening in the market as well. So we'll talk about job seeking goals today, really reflecting and slowing down on what you want, because when you get that offer, it's very exciting. And I will tell you, sometimes the shiny thing is just the shiny thing, and it may not be the best thing for you when you slow down and really consider what you want. More money may or may not make you happier, and I have a story to share with you about that. Also, I want to talk about leveraging your network and how to find that hidden job, or just get really good feedback around, is this a good place to work? How do they value their people? How do they look at promotional opportunities? Who do they promote? Really leveraging our network to understand the opportunities that we're applying to, and if we really want to be there. Because marketing is marketing, but people that have worked there or are working there, that's really valuable. So I want to touch on that. And then we'll talk about online reviews a little bit, because I think there's some good things there and some things that you may want to throw out, or things that you might, when you read the review, take into consideration before you think a company is one way or another. And that all goes into vetting the company, right? Really understanding that offer and who they are, and if you want to do it. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. I'm the author of 3 books. The first one is called Recession Proof Yourself. You can find that on Amazon. The second one is called I Quit. Working for You Isn't Working for Me. And then the third one is called Hear Us Roar, Unapologetic Women Leading in Corporate America. I thought I wrote a book about women's leadership. Apparently, I just wrote a book about leadership. I've had a lot of people all over the world read that book, male and female alike, and they seem to enjoy some of the commentary around that. I'm very qualified to be a coach. There's a lot of coaches out there, and so I think it's only fair to distinguish what makes me a little different than other coaches. I've done this before coaches were a thing. Actually, my first book came out in 2009. This is before Amazon even published books. I actually went to a small publisher and was accepted. And I've been coaching well over 20 years, probably close to 25 years in the space of engineering, IT, and cyber is my specialty. My specialty is not nonprofit or education. I'm a corporate America person and understand that game and how it's played pretty well. I've read tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of resumes in my tenure, and I'm ultimately the one that pulls your resume out of the pile and calls you and figures out if you want the job or not, and if you're qualified, and moves you forward. I'm also the person in my day job that gets the feedback from the vice president or director that's hiring you, and knows why you're chose of the other 4 or 5 candidates, and why the other 4 or 5 candidates were not chosen, or what have you. So I think the big differential there is I'm in the trenches. A lot of coaches out there, they've got some good experience, but they're not in the game. I'm in the game actively. And then the other thing that's really changed for me and for my clients is that I've done job changes recently. I left a company after 11 years, went out there on my own, can tell you something about the market there, landed about 15 months in a very good position, decided I didn't want to do that, left and went to another one. So I think it's one thing to coach the game. I think it's a whole other thing to have the experience of the job seeker, which really changed my coaching quite a bit. And I can honestly say I have the physical experience of what this is like to look for a job, pandemic, post-pandemic, et cetera. So, we used to call last year the Great Onboarding. And because so many people quit, they stopped calling it quiet quitting and they started calling it the Great Onboarding, which is kind of interesting because companies were really struggling with the amount of people that they were trying to onboard, frankly. The beginning part of this year, I wouldn't say that things have slowed down. I would say it's not the rapid pace that it was. There's still plenty of positions that are being hired. You're seeing a lot of layoffs, frankly, in the news from the big tech companies, Meta, Facebook, Google, Apple. We can name all the big names there and read on LinkedIn every day who's laying off. But when you dig into the data around that, what we see is they're really right sizing the companies and the staff. And when you dig even further in, I posted some of that on my LinkedIn, they really cut a bunch of HR and did some of it hit IT and engineering? Maybe, but if a product was launched new and then they canceled it or decided they weren't going to put the money in that, I have seen people spill out due to that because there was a lot of growth in business and now they're pulling back a bit. But overall, I wouldn't say anything to be afraid of. I wouldn't say, the numbers don't look like recession to me. The unemployment numbers certainly are not that. It's really more about companies right sizing right now in 2023 and going from there. So you're still going to have some competition in the ad response when you apply. The numbers may not be as high as they were before. And they probably will increase from this point of the year going forward. You might find people laid off or passive people starting to want to look around again. So it'll be interesting to see what the market will bear and what it will hold. This year, companies are really concerned about two things, and I talked about it in the last two webinars. They're really concerned about what does the skill set cost? Like for real, what does it cost? Because we have recession, we had inflation, we have recession coming, and then we overpaid people by 30 to 50% during the pandemic. And so the big question that companies are asking are, if I hire a software engineer, if I hire a cybersecurity person, what does it really cost me as a company and what's fair? And then they're also looking at their internal equity as well with people that stayed. So that's a big piece that they're looking at. The other big piece they're looking at, again, we covered it on the last webinar, is the benefits package and what's available there. And so offers that are extended, they're often very detailed around what they have to offer. And they go into a lot of things rather than just, we have medical, dental, 401k. They actually tend to go a little deeper into the offers. I know I certainly do with the people that I hire. And so you're going to see the offers look and feel a little bit different. I'm not seeing personally a lot of competition. So when I come in with an offer to a candidate, I'm not seeing right now in late April, I'm not seeing that they have 2 and 3 competing offers where a year ago they did. I'm not seeing that now. I'm seeing they might be in final rounds of interviews someplace else, but I'm not seeing that running at the candidates like I did a year ago. So that's really changed. So understand that it's changed, right? And so if people have this huge warm reception and all this money thrown at them a year ago, I can tell you right now that's not what's going on across the board in industry right now. So when we talk about offers, especially if you're in a company a long period of time, like let's say you're in a company 10 years or 15 years, even 5 to 7 years, that's considered in today's range a long period of time. The big question that you want to ask yourself before you even start applying is, what is it going to take for you to walk away? Because typically what I have found the last 2.5 years is there are 3 things that make a candidate actually leave and give notice. And if you're very clear about those things and what it is for you, then during the interview process and before you get to offer, you can start to think about those things, ask questions, make sure those things are there for you, and also make sure that it's a part of the offer. So we talk about offers, there's lots more than just the compensation piece. There can be, for example, additional education money that's available there. I've seen it anywhere between $2,000 and $5,000 a year. If you're an IT or engineering professional, you could easily get a certificate or maybe put that money towards an MBA or something else that you want. The beauty of that is if the company will pay for it, that's portable. That means that you're building your skill set and keeping sharp on the job, but if and when you leave, that goes with you and the company paid for it. So to ask questions around continuing education, how much is given, the kinds of things they do to support that, I think are important. 401k match. And then the question is, when do they vest is a good thing to ask. Asking about career growth and promotion. People always ask about career growth and promotion, but they never ask this question. They never ask, when was the last time you promoted someone? And where did they go? So you want to understand, does the company do that? Is that a part of their culture? Every company will say, oh yeah, we've got growth. We've got lots of growth, but that's not really the question. The question to the leader that you're going to work for is, when was the last time you promoted somebody and where did they go? So that's interesting. Did they leave the team completely? Did they go from a senior to a principal? Did they go from one business unit completely to another business unit to learn something else? That's important to know that and to understand if that leader is going to be your champion or not. That's all the stuff that we don't think about in offer. Often we just look at benefit package and money, but that is a piece that you might want to consider as well. So I think the big question that you want to ask yourself is, what are those 2 or 3 things that if they offered you that, there's no hesitation, you would leave your job? So what you're going to experience out there is there's still a lot of opportunities in general. Companies are right sizing. It certainly hasn't dropped off. If you're in IT, engineering, cyber, you're still going to get a lot of recruiters calling. You know, they may or may not know what they're doing. They might call you for a very junior position, which is annoying to you, but you know, you'll see they're coming your direction. You'll see a lot of activity on LinkedIn with them trying to reach you. We are seeing people with tenured people leaving jobs that have been there a long period of time that are starting to look around a little bit. The interview process is still pretty much the same. You can expect the big houses have shifted and moved to this new format where they're only doing 2 or 3 interviews and that's it. Unless you're like a C-level player, if you're a technologist, what we're seeing is typically a screen, somebody like me, the hiring manager and the technical team, and maybe a technical test. I've seen technical tests in the software development areas like in Java or .NET. Cyber, I don't see testing at all, but I definitely see the large Fortune 500 companies cutting it off at 2 or 3 interviews. They really come to these interviews prepared. A lot of times the interview panels are very diverse and they want to really understand what the skill set is and kind of evaluate that and go for there. There still is some talk about some sloppy virtual onboarding because companies took a lot of last year and part of this year to really get that taken care of and a little easier, because during the pandemic, remember, we couldn't check your I-9 because we physically couldn't be around you. So a lot of that onboarding is virtual. A lot of it's been fixed, but sometimes still the computer doesn't show up because you got a refurbished one or it shows up and it doesn't work. There's still some of that. I'm definitely seeing hybrid positions out there, although not a lot. They'll say the ads will become clear because people in my line of work, frankly, were really tired and we find a great candidate and then they say, oh, I want to be remote. So now we're posting in our ads, this job requires that you're in the office 2 to 3 days a week. It is not a remote position. So really slow down and read those ads. Same thing with the visa issue. When it says there is no visa sponsorship, what that also means is there is no visa transfer. So we get EADs that apply, that requires a transfer. And really what we're saying, but not saying in the ad, is you have to be a US citizen or a green card holder only. So read the ads, because the ads now are becoming more specific around citizenship requirements, and also if you have to be in the office or not. So this piece is really about utilizing the network. And in my own experience, I found this to be extremely valuable when, after 11 years, I went out there myself and was looking for another position. And I think there's this old news or story around, especially in engineering and IT, to get a network and then ask them to help you to get your resume out of the applicant response and on the hiring manager's desk. Amazingly, people don't do that as much anymore. And if they're asked to do that, or blindly asked to do that in LinkedIn, and they don't know you, often that doesn't really go anywhere. What is really useful, and probably more useful than that, is frankly going into your network and saying things like, hey, I'm about to apply to this company or that company. I know you work there or did work there. What do you know about the culture? And that kind of information is very valuable if you're looking at a couple of different places to work for. When I was in my search, I was looking at an extremely large bank, and I knew 2 or 3 people that had worked there. And so I got them on the phone. I said, what do you know about this company? And a couple of them had worked there or were working there. And it was interesting because the feedback was very mixed. One of them said, it's a very hostile culture. You deal with a lot of people from New York City. They are yelling and screaming on the phone. If you can handle that, then it's an okay place. I had another person say, it depends on where you are within this company. Some divisions are phenomenal and great to work with, and some of them are not, and hostile and nasty. It was very interesting to get mixed reviews on the actual culture. Regardless, I actually did apply to that company. I actually did interview there a couple of times. I actually did pull offer. I rejected the offer because what I had uncovered during the interview process allowed me to make my own decision along with the feedback that I had heard. And I went a completely different direction with the offers that I had looked at. So I've got to say, my network really helped me to make that decision and gave me additional information that I would not have had if I had just based it off the interviews themselves. So think about that if you've got a target list of companies you want to apply, see if anybody in your organization knows anything about them. Ask questions like, when it comes to promotion, how does that work there? Do you go in and you have to stay in that job forever? Ask the questions that are important to you and see what they have to say. I remember asking somebody in my network about a different company, a huge company that I had applied to. And right out of the gate, she said to me, we send a lot of emails about diversity around here. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So her point was, I don't know that we really walk the talk. That hasn't been my experience. For me personally, that wasn't a hard stop either way. So it didn't matter to me, but it was an interesting comment that obviously I remembered because I'm bringing it up here. So, if there's things that are important to you about how you're treated, work-life balance, also defining what does work-life balance mean to you? Because when you come out of the gate with that in an interview, everybody, especially in technology, gets like, we all know you have to work more hours in technology because technology has to keep moving, particularly if you're in banking and financial. So, really understanding what does that mean to you in terms of work-life balance and being able to articulate that. If diversity is important to you, what does that mean to you? And how do you articulate that? If being promoted is important to you, how do you articulate that? So I think careful throwing out the blanket things, because they're just going to barrage you with bullet points and maybe awards, which may or may not be real. You really drill down. You're all smart. Go to root cause analysis and ask those kinds of questions, especially with your network. That's going to help you to figure out which offer is which. If you're working with a recruiter, even that first time interview, that first screen that you get, with somebody like me, my screens are pretty deep. They're 20 to 30 minutes. A lot of times you have the experience probably about 10 or 15 minutes. Ask them, have you worked with this hiring manager before? You'll be surprised. Some of them have built entire teams with that hiring manager, and know that initiative really well and can speak to that leadership in their style. Others don't have a clue, and that's okay too, but that would be helpful information. Ask them how long they've worked with the company, and what do they like best about the company. Ask some questions like that. What do they know about the company when you go into those things like promotion, diversity, like time off, work-life balance? Ask some questions around that and ask them to give maybe some examples as well. You can get a lot of information out of the recruiter, and often IT and engineering professionals, they dismiss the recruiter, and they actually have a whole lot of information that if you ask good questions, they would open up and answer, and you could have a good experience through the process, whether you took the job or not. So I would encourage you to utilize them because they can really help you to vet an offer or vet the job. So these are questions that I actually asked during my transition that are kind of pretty pointed and very clear. My favorite is, on a really bad day, what does it look like around here? Because I wanted a sense in how they treated people. And for me, like when it's a really, really terrible day, as long as I can laugh with somebody through that, I can stay in the job a long period of time. If everybody is like really upset and super reactionary, it's probably not a place for me. I like to ask questions around escalations, who's involved and why. For me personally, I don't think it's appropriate that 15 people are tagged on an email. And I think that at some point that's really about the person that's tagging the 15 people on the email. And so I want, again, that tells me about the culture. Like, who are they? How do you guys really treat each other behind closed doors that I can't see during this interview process? When somebody is angry or breaks a process or something happens, how is that handled? I like to ask those questions. You can flip that around in IT and say, like, during code review meetings, how do people act? I think that's a great question. When you're supporting an employee, what does that look like? You know, getting a sense of if they're hands-on or if they're hands-off. And I always tell the person that's interviewing me, there aren't any right or wrong answers. I'm just trying to understand your leadership and how you like to work. I like to ask questions like, how do you like information? Do you like to do weekly one-on-ones? Do you want me to catch you on the fly in IM and ask a question? You know, how do you like to work? Tell me about the best people that work with you. What do you like about them? I often ask that in an interview. And I always remember, and I will tell you that the website is marketing. And I will tell you that Glassdoor is a lot of angry people typically. And the really great reviews, it has been known that somebody in the higher echelon chains went to their people and said, we've got a lot of bad reviews on Glassdoor or on Reddit. Can you please get your teams to post something nice? So you can't really read something online on Glassdoor or some of the reviews and unequivocally say, okay, the company is this way or that way, and then vet your job offer that way. It's not a great thing to do. If you are insistent on reading all those reviews, the biggest thing I would say is be careful of the title and the level of the person that posted and what they said. There was a particular company out there and the reviews were particularly poor, but when you read all the reviews, there were all the customer care call center people that wrote the reviews. So it didn't give me any idea about what their talent acquisition looked like or their leadership or anything. So when you're looking at websites and you're looking at things online, it's a very, very small piece that should be factored in. You're better to ask your network and you're better to ask good questions in the interview to call out if it's the right place for you. And then I'd end this with always ask open-ended questions. You know, ask the interviewers open-ended questions. Tell me about your leadership style. Stop talking, you know, see what they have to say. Tell me about the kinds of people that can get promoted here. Why, who is it and why? See what they have to say. There's a lot of good information you can get about a culture just by you being good in the interview and you asking what you need. So remember that the job search can have a lot of ups and downs. And the biggest piece that I can tell you during any job search is to try to stay very stable and up in here. It's very difficult. So But it's really important because if you don't and those offers fall, you need clarity to make a good decision and have good discernment. And the problem with the job search is, somebody like me reaches out to you and you're all excited. And then we make the interview and, I call you and we have that time. And then I don't get feedback for 5 days. And then you start to go into this anger, frustration. Oh, it's never going to work out. It's never going to work out. And then all of a sudden I call you and say, hey, we just haven't made any decisions yet. I'll get back to you next week. And then you're over here in hope and maybe enthusiasm. And you're thinking, oh, I'm going to get it. You're starting to commit. And that's not what's happening at all, because they're still reviewing the other candidates and there's a whole bunch of stuff I can't tell you. And then you get the automatic decline. You're back here in anger. So it's important that you stay very level, and how you stay level is just stay to the process. Apply online, you get the call, you go through the process, you make sure you ask your questions in the process, and then the rest will be what it will be. And when you get to the offer stage, make sure that you're asking good questions before you join so that there's nothing hidden or uncovered that you're not aware of. And that goes beyond the money piece. It's definitely okay to reject a job. I had a candidate do that yesterday with me. It was an internal candidate, and we had a really transparent, vulnerable conversation before she interviewed with the hiring manager. And I looked at her at one point on camera and said, here's the bottom line. You are about to sunset on your career. I don't know how many years you have here, but I get the sense it's not very long. And do you want this? Do you really want to leave where you're at and go to another position? And if you do, I want you to really vet it and really figure out if that's what you want. And it's great if you do, but it's going to be change. And if you're a mid-level career, this might make sense. But if you're only going to be here 2 or 3 years and then retire, really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, because you don't get your time back. You're not going to get it back. And it was interesting. She went through the entire interview process. And when I talked to her yesterday, she said, it just stuck in my head because I don't have any motivation. I don't dislike my boss. I don't dislike my job. I don't dislike the money I make. I don't have anything. There's nothing really that would make me want to do this. What made me want to do this was it's a great hiring manager. And then she said, but during the interview, she said, I was going to be front and center with the executives and have a lot of visibility. And I stopped and I said, that's a nice way of saying you're going in a hot seat. Because at your level, you don't go in front of executives unless it's all crashing and falling and burning on the ground. And she's like, yeah, that's how I read it. And I don't think I want to do that. And I just don't think I want to do that. And so it's okay to reject whether you're an internal candidate or an external candidate, because it's really about being fair to the company and it's being fair to yourself. The other story that I would share with you around this is when I went through the last job search, I ended up with a lot of very large names producing offers. And there was one in particular that was definitely, if I dropped their name here on the webinar, everybody would be like, oh my God, they offered you a job? And I would be like, yeah, they did. And I rejected them. And if you just heard that name, the first thing you would say is why? Because it's such the shiny thing and it's such the impressive thing. And to have it on your resume and to be at a party or a barbecue and be like, yeah, I work for so-and-so, it's a big deal. And everything about that was wrong. And I knew it from my network, and I knew it from when I vetted them in the interview. I vetted them twice, and and then the offer was just a pile of money, like stupid truckload of money. And I walked, and in fact, the more they ran at me, they scared me. Anybody else would have taken it and ran. I don't know. So it takes again discernment and smarts to be okay and to reject. And then there was another offer that fell, and I knew it wasn't right because I wasn't going to report to somebody that was had no experience in leadership and was quite a bit younger. And they even said, if we gave you this job, you could not report to her. And I said, no, I could not report to her. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I would be coaching her. So that doesn't work. And so that was awkward. And so I didn't continue there. And there was one company that was just super gracious. And that whenever they called me and they said, hey, Elizabeth, we don't have all the information, we'll call you back today, they called within 2 hours. And I was like, oh my gosh, they really know what they're doing. And the process was so comfortable and so nice and so respectful. And then the offer was generous that I said, okay, this is very clear to me where I'm going. So word of caution, the shiny thing sometimes is just the shiny thing. And if you don't vet it properly, you may not know. So make sure that you vet these positions properly in that interview process so that you know. And then when you reject, be okay with the rejection and don't ever look back. Don't ever look back, because usually where you go is where you need to be. Here's some sources that I left here on the presentation on some of the stats in the earlier slide. And that's kind of wraps it up for me today. So again, my name's Elizabeth Lyons. If you want to look at my website, it's lyonsology.com. You can see I've won an award as a coach. You can see the books there, my philosophy, a couple of videos. Anybody in the IEEE that sees this, they're more than welcome to reach out to me for a 15-minute session, no charge. If they want me just to review the resume or they have just a couple questions, I'm happy to go over that and then explore if my coaching program is right for you or not. You're welcome to join me on LinkedIn. I've got a lot of good content that rolls out there on a daily basis around job seeking, around leadership, around IT, security, and also leadership posts is what I put up there. So anyway, I'm going to turn it back over to Jonathan. That kind of wraps me up for today. And thanks for having me.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So, folks, we will now open up the floor for questions from our audience. Go ahead and post your questions in the comments and live chat sections, and we'll load them onto the stream for Elizabeth to answer. So, Elizabeth, let's see. Our first question from our audience member. Audience member asks, this is not quite in the scope of vetting offers. Do you have any particular advice for dealing with recruiters and hiring managers who reject you as a candidate by ceasing all communications?
Yeah, I want to explain why that happens. And I know it's difficult because some people are truly trying to improve and they want feedback. Like, if I bombed the technical interview, what was it? Right? I'll go back and study. Or if you didn't like me, what was it? You know, they want that. But legally, and particularly where we are in 2023, we don't owe you that. We owe you a polite decline in a timely manner. We don't owe you feedback. I actually had two different teams this week. One of them said, hey, do you have a boilerplate of like what we could say if for the candidate, they asked us, you know, why they rejected? And I said, absolutely, under no circumstances, do not answer them and send them my direction. They get the automated decline and we're done. So there's legal reasons, because there's a lot of lawsuits that are filed. You'll take it personal. You'll turn around and try to say we did this or we did that and file a claim. And we're just not going there. And frankly, we don't owe you that. We don't owe you anything. So it's really up to you to kind of figure it out. I know that's hard to listen to, especially if it's something in the technical interview that you think you missed, because that you could improve upon, you know. But ultimately, in the big scale of things, you know, maybe that's just not the place for you and they're doing you a big favor too. So I would trust the process.
That's definitely a really interesting insight here. Thank you for that. Coming from someone who or has also gone through the frustrations of not getting a response from a potential employer, knowing that, just that insight that you provided is enough to at least give a little bit of consolation
Yeah.
that there is a reason and we're not just being ignored. So thank you for that, Elizabeth, and thank you to our audience member for that question. Not so much a question, but a comment from Rain. Definitely a good question to ask for sure. When was the last time you promoted somebody and where they go? Yeah, I really like that. Definitely worth asking an employer that's the potential job or path in that company. So thank you for that. Our audience member Matthew asks, to follow up on that, what about when the hiring manager or recruiter does not send a rejection or respond to any messages? Just a second or third interview, then radio silence.
You know, the only time I see that, and again, I love these things because I can kind of peel back the curtain and tell you like what's really going on. You'll get the final rejection when they close the rack. Either the ATS Workday will automatically send that decline out, because once they push offer, then it automatically declines the other candidates with the, hey, sorry, you didn't get the job. So sometimes that radio silence is a couple of things. Sometimes it doesn't mean no. So I want to be clear on that. Sometimes it means they're figuring out the position. They all of a sudden had an internal apply last minute. They, they extended offer to somebody and they were about to onboard them, and then they decline the offer. You don't know. So sometimes the radio silence doesn't mean no. The final rejection is the final rejection. Everybody typically gets that anyway, because for legal reasons, we have to show 50 people applied. Of those 50, we took 5 to interview. Of those 5, we chose this one. And this one, heads and shoulders above in the documentation, is the most qualified for the job. Not the most liked, not the best career path, not the prettiest resume, the most qualified above the other candidates. And it's documented that way. So radio silence goes on for a couple reasons. Sometimes it doesn't mean no. I'd move on and keep applying if it were me, but you'd be surprised. Like, I've gotten rejection notes 3 to 6 months after I applied there. I'm like, oh my God. But that's when they just closed the rack. That's what happens.
Yeah, especially considering how many applications these companies must get. I'm sure it's not too surprising to find out that some of them just get lost in the funnel as well. So, yeah, thank you for that insight. So I think we're out of questions for right now, folks. If you come up with any, feel free to upload or send them in the live chat. So in the meantime, while we wait for some questions, Elizabeth, I have my own questions for you. So, you've talked about how it's absolutely okay for a person to decline or reject a job offer before
Mhm.
they even start the job. So I have seen situations, and I'm sure you probably have seen some as well, where people end up accepting the job, and they sign um, an agreement. Uh, are there any options for someone who accepts a job offer and realizes the job isn't what they expected, and possibly may even want to get out of that? Of course, it depends on the contract, I'm sure, but what are your thoughts on that?
Typically, it is what it is. On the offer letter, they're going to state for legal reasons, they're going to state your start date, because that's going to trigger payroll. They're going to state the compensation and the address. Now that's a tricky thing. I do want to comment on that for a second here. So if a position is someplace else and you're like, yeah, I'll move, and you're thinking, well, it'll take you some time to move, I'll move later, or you don't have any intention to move and you're going to force it remote, or you're not going to go into the office 3 days a week. The offer letter, I found out a few weeks ago, is a legal binding agreement. And so let's say that you really want remote. You said you'd move to Dallas. You're not going to move to Dallas. Or you're going to move later, this or that. That actually you're already employed there. That actually goes to employee relations, and they just work to terminate you because you signed an agreement saying that you would be in that office 3 days a week or whatever it was. You're tied to a physical office.
Mhm.
So that's an interesting thing around agreements. But other than that, it's really your job in the interview to figure out what it is and what it's not, in order to figure out if the job is what you think it is. And that's what I mean by vetting a position. You've got to really ask lots of questions to understand if it's a place that you want to be. But once you land there, you would have to look for another job if it wasn't what you thought it was. If it wasn't what it was advertised or what they told you, chances are you didn't ask all the questions to really uncover it. And usually there's some weird things that'll happen, or little things people will say, and we don't look at it because we don't want to look at it, because we either want out of the job we're in, or we just want to get off of unemployment. And, it's like dating. It's like you see the signs, and you just keep dating that person. But there's
Mm.
something probably not quite right. It's the same in interviews. If you really replay what they said, how they said it, their tone of voice, and you asked all the questions, you have your answer. Then you're just gathering more information. So in the end, I always tell people, write down on a piece of paper, every company's, write down the pros and cons. As dumb as that sounds, it's the easiest. Get it out of your head and see which company stocks up. But you're going back to what's going to make me walk away. Are
Mm.
those things there or not?
Gotcha. Thank you for that insight. Also, real quick question, just kind of on going
Mhm.
with the job offer and or interview process. Is it acceptable to think to bring a notepad or anything and take notes during an
Oh,
interview?
absolutely. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're going to make notes. You should be able to make notes. It's no problem if you're on camera to be off to the side, jotting some notes. It's totally okay to say, you might see me looking off camera. I'm just jotting a few notes here. Have your questions outlined in front of you. Absolutely. I think it's good to have the questions that you need answered in front of you so that you can remember them. Because in the throes of the interview, it's exciting or nerve wracking. And so then you've got
Right.
something to go back to ask.
Great, thank you. And for the folks who are asking for Elizabeth's LinkedIn information, I just posted them in the comment section. So definitely reach out to and connect with her when you get a chance. So this next question from our audience member: some job advertisements stay in the company's portal for more than 2 months. Does it mean they are still hiring?
A job ad, a job posting for a position will stay open as long as until they have a finalist and they extend offer and have it accepted. This is just sloppy recruiting. Like I pull my ads right away. Like I had 50 people apply in like 7 days. I pulled my ad. I know I'm going to get a finalist out of 50 people. And I know, cause I already interviewed 4. Right. And so the hiring manager was like, wait, I can't find it. I'm like, because I yanked it, because I don't want it out there. So what it means really for the job seeker is they don't have a final offer accepted. Are they still hiring? Maybe not. It's hard to say.
Great, thank you. This next question. So Rain asks, would love to hear your thoughts around negotiation, especially for minorities. I would normally ask for a higher number, but during this economic environment, should I ask for lower?
I don't think that's a fair question because it doesn't work like that. You don't just throw out a number and hope they get it. This is based off of the skill set, not what the market will bear necessarily. So I don't give somebody $20,000 more, or like the offers I'm crafting, $35,000 more. I'm giving those offers based off of what the skill set, what they have, and based off of internal equity. So your question is loaded, even from a legal aspect. It's not even a legal question. It's like, can I get more? Should I ask for less? It's not the question. The question is, what is your skill set command? So you would have to go out and do a whole bunch of digging and data on your title, the band, the city and state you live in, and go from there. And what are you making now? And then figure out if there's an increase there or not. Just in your title now. Now, let's say you want to step up from an individual contributor to a leader. It's the same exercise. You have to go by data, not the rest of the stuff, because offers are crafted based off of the skill set, not how much you can get or negotiate.
Gotcha. Rain, hope that answered your question, and thanks for the question. Jennifer asks, do you have any recommendations for how to parse it if you might be working with multiple teams and you find it different, better or worse cultures among them?
I don't understand the question. How to parse. Do you have a recommendation? How do you parse it if you're working with a team? Okay, so I think I'm going to answer the question. So, and Jennifer, if there's more there, feel free to chime in. So here's what I always do. You have questions in the interview. They're the same set of questions. You've got 5 questions. You ask every single team member the same question, right? So even if that seems odd, right? Your technical team might be a little different than the recruiter, than the hiring manager. What I'm finding in interviews is the hiring manager is just looking for cultural fit and chemistry. They often don't do deep dive technical, but you're going to have the same broad, open-ended questions, and you ask those very consistently throughout your process to all of the teams. Because if you go off script there, it's not going to give you the same results. It's a lot like baking a cake. So if you baked a cake and you didn't have a recipe and you threw in 3 eggs, and the next time you bake the cake, you put in 2 eggs and more sugar or less sugar, you put in coconut oil versus butter. Every time you taste that cake, it tastes different. It's really important in the interview process that when you vet a company, it's the same set of questions all the way through, because you'll also get different answers. You could get different answers, and that might be like, flag, I got different answers. I don't want to do this. You could be like, oh, I got different answers, but I got different insight and different input, and that's interesting to me. Like there's more here to uncover, which brings me to a couple more questions. So you want to keep your line of questions the same all the way through your process.
For sure. Thank you. And thanks for the question, Jennifer. So again, folks, feel free to send your questions into the comments and live chat section. Oh, actually, let's see. Nope, actually, we'll wait for a few for some more questions. So, Elizabeth, my question, another one. What about startups where there isn't a whole lot of information
Yeah.
about them online?
Startups always make me nervous. Startups make me nervous in this environment right now, like really nervous.
Mm,
Um, I mean, they're fun. Like they're fun. They're fun. They're exciting. Um, but it's a hot seat. It's a pressure cooker, and then people get really not fun and not exciting when it's a pressure cooker. So
mhm,
I think that it's really about people that love that environment and want to be a part of that and will go through the hard times and will take a big risk in working a lot of hours, or at least to say they've had that experience on their resume. So you're not going to find a lot online. You can vet them. What I found in my experience is they're overwhelmingly positive. They can overcome every objection and always sounds like sunshine and roses. The real question is career path and risk.
mhm,
Because I mean, realistically, how many of those startups really make it, right? How many of them do run out of funding, right? And then there you are. So I think that's what it's about. And sometimes people and point to their career say, I really want to do a startup, be so much fun. If I only get a year or two out of it, I'm fine with it. And they accept the risk. I think that's what it's about. Or I don't have the stomach for being laid off in 2 years. I got to pay off my student loans or whatever it is. I don't want to do this. I'd rather go on with a big company and in a long period of time build my career and have the illusion at least of safety. I think that's what it really comes down to. You're not really going to find a lot online, to your point.
mhm,
And I don't think you're really going to know until you were in that startup. So I think the
mhm.
bigger question there is, what do you want to do with your career? Do you have the stomach for the risk? Can you financially do it? Because if next week they can't make payroll and there you are, can you cover yourself?
Great insight. Thank you. So you've had a very long like career and a lot of huge client list. Um, what are some of the most common factors to look for when evaluating a job offer, or what's the most common theme that you've seen with your clients? What that they're looking for when evaluating a job offer? Do you think?
Yeah, I think everybody is really, especially the pandemic, post pandemic, everybody's really about culture, but that's very subjective. Like, what does that
Mhm,
mean to you? I can put up, for me personally, I can put up with a lot. So I don't demand a lot from the culture, but then there's this point of no return with me. So I need to make sure a couple of things are there and then I'm okay.
mhm,
For me, it's like when it's a terrible, terrible day, how do people act? So, I mean, for me, when I was in, my last company of 11 years, when it was a terrible day, there was a point, it was so ridiculous. We would just start laughing about it as a group, or we would call somebody else and be like, can you even believe this is happening? Am I crazy? And you were able to do that. Or maybe you were in a position with the business and you really felt like you were in the foxhole getting shot perpetually. And if you had a partner in that, or your boss knew that, to have that kind of camaraderie, to just be able to blow off a little steam, but still be professional, that to me was like, that's where I want to work. To me, when it's ridiculous and hostile and angry and I can just laugh and everybody can laugh, that's where I want to be. So work-life balance means something different to me. Culture means something different to me. The big thing I see they're evaluating is culture. The big
mhm.
thing I see them evaluating is life work balance. Careful if you say that in IT and engineering, because now all of a sudden they're like, what do you mean? You only want to work 8 hours? You're like, no, that's not what I mean. I just mean, like, can I take vacation days around Christmas? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's how you evaluate what's important to you. What I find with a lot of people is money is last on the list right now. It's more about having a good leader and having a decent culture and feeling valued, ultimately, is what I see over and over and over again. I'll tell you a quick story. I had a candidate this week. We sharpened our pencils and put together some numbers. And she's in a very, very high demand skill set. There's no question. And she is highly compensated for what she does. And so when we sharpened our pencils, it took me and the director aback, because our offer was like $6,000 more. And he's like, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to offer this. And he's like, I don't know. Well, we have to do something. Like we've looked for 8 months and talked to 14 people, and there's 300 that we've looked at, and I'm not doing this anymore. Neither are you. You're not telling your boss we're not doing this. I said, look, I'm just going to extend it, and I'm just going to see what she says, because I'm not 100% clear on her motivators and what's driving her to make a change. And we don't know until I talk to her. We really don't know. And so I extended the offer, and I just kept going. I was like, here's the offer, here's the bonus. And I knew this isn't like this huge thing I'm handing her. I'm like, and then the 401k matches by this much, which makes us very competitive. And then invest in this much, and that makes us very competitive. And then we have, you can have $5,000 a year for continuing education. Like if you wanted to get a certificate, and then let me tell you about the PTO, and let me tell you about community service days that we give you. And I just kept giving her like total compensation package. Mm-hmm. And then I said, so what do you think? And she never questioned the money, not once. And I was like, oh, that's not what I thought was going to happen. And so I hung up the phone, and we were hammering out start dates, and she had a vacation. And she was like going to go back to India for 2.5 weeks. And it was like, I don't know how we're going to make that work. And she literally says to me on the phone, can I call you in the morning? I'll actually cancel or try to move my plane reservations because I really want this job. And I was like, wow. And so I got to tell you, been doing this 25 years, maybe longer. And I knew the biggest problem when I hung up the phone was not the husband or family. And I knew that was the next factor, that if somebody was like, oh, heck no, then it was over. And so I just got quiet and waited. And the next morning I was like, what do you think about the start date? She's like, yeah, I didn't know this. Like, my husband's in transition. I really want this job. It's not a good time to go home to India. I canceled the vacation. We can do it later. All right. So again, she was very clear in what she wanted, where she wanted to go, because I talked a huge amount around career path. And then I said, I can even make this happen for you. I can even get you another meeting with the hiring manager, and you guys can literally talk career path and what the future holds for you here, because I'm telling you, it's quite rosy. But I want you to feel really great about this. And she was like, I would love that. I'm definitely taking the job, but that would be great. It's all about career path for her. It was all about us articulating that. It was all about the timing. And I had no idea that her husband was in transition. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if husband's laid off and it's a money issue, or he's also looking. I don't know what that means, but she had motivation to take it regardless of an offer that wasn't huge and fat. So here we go. The question is, what are the common factors? Well, for everybody, it's different. The big piece is, what do you really need? It goes back to that slide. What's going to make you walk away, and knowing what that is. And I think the longer you're in a job, that's really the question. When I left Fiserv after 11 years, that was the question, and money wasn't even on my list. And the increase that I ended up getting was very substantial, but it wasn't even I could care less. It wasn't about that. And for her, it wasn't about that either. She was fine. And honestly, that's what the skill set bore for the compensation. You know what I mean? She was overpaid someplace else. That doesn't matter to me. It goes back to Rain's question, right? It's like the job pays what the job pays. It's not a subjective thing. If you're a minority or a woman or a person of color or not, it's not subjective based on that. Numbers are numbers. They're facts. They're not feelings. It is what it is. A waitress gets paid so much due to the skill set versus a big data person. You're paid based off of the skill, and those are all calculated. Now you got variations depending on industries, like banking and financial pays different than manufacturing. And you have different grades, but for the most part, across the board, there's a range, and you fall within that range. So that's the money piece of it. But, for across the board, that's a very, very long answer, but across the board, people are looking for culture. People are looking for life-work balance. Money is not necessarily always what's important to them. Stability. I'm hearing that a lot in interviews. Stability, a place that they can grow.
Hmm.
And that's also different things to different people as well.
Fantastic, thank you. It's really, really great story too. It's interesting how that worked out. And yeah, for sure, compensation definitely seems to be lower priority on the list for many people these days. I think people are starting to value their time a lot more. I've seen
Yeah.
plenty of articles and stories about people who work in the financial sector who make a lot of money, but they're almost never home because they're always in the office. And then you see all these stories about, if you could, people giving advice about if they could give advice to their younger
Yeah.
selves, like a common theme is focus less on the money, more on family, more on
So I
time.
I want to comment on that. So when I left Fiserv, I took a job. I was like a senior manager, and it was a big deal. And then my job within 15 months went to 21 direct employees with 4 different countries, and a business that was hostile and coming at me every day, which I handled fine. But the 21 people in addition to that was too much. And so I decided I didn't want to do this. I was always happy running a desk. I was always happy. I did this to do it. I actually left Exceeds many as a leader, which is, something, you're 15, 16 months in, left, went back to running a desk, what I've always done, love it. Last week was the first week I took a vacation and signed off and did not have access to email and
Mhm.
had no work computer. That was the first time since my honeymoon, 20 years.
Wow.
20 years. And part of it is I'm in banking and financial, money has to move. And then my jobs are sometimes visibility all the way up to a CISO because I'm in cybersecurity. So everybody knows what I touch and what I do in my name. So
Hmm.
I don't really get to just I'm like an IT person. I don't get to just sign off. And I'll tell you, there was nothing quite like being off for 9 days and not looking at email, and nothing fell apart and everything was fine. And now this week I'm extending 5 and 6 offers. So that your time off, you don't get it back. And I am much happier as a very strong individual contributor. I am so much happier doing this than I was, running a global team. And so
Hmm.
I think it's a personal decision. And I remember women in leadership, 4 different ones coming to me and saying, wow, that's quite a statement. I don't know anybody that's taken a pile of money and done all that you've done and then takes a step back. I don't know anybody. That's a lot. That's a lot of wisdom. I'm like, well, I don't get it back. So, and I want a full life. I always wanted a full life. I took the leadership job to see what I could do. And then it just grew to a point where it was ridiculous and I didn't want to do it.
Hmm.
So I think that's important too. If leadership isn't always what it's cracked up to be. Money isn't always what it's cracked up to be. And what's the point of making all the money if you can't get a day off and enjoy it? I mean, really, what's the point?
Absolutely, yeah. Really great how you've been able to improve your life through stepping back. I think that point really resonates with a lot of people. So you know, thank you for that. And I
Sure.
think we'll end it off with this last question from our audience member. What strategy would you use if you only need a job for the next 12 months? So if you know that you're looking for just a temporary job.
Yeah,
Um,
I go for the money, and I would go into something where I know I could be successful, and even if it's a little bit of money, I would know what my bottom line number was, and then I would know what my huge number was. So
mhm,
if you're only doing it 12 months, I would go. If it came to me quicker, I would take the lower number as long as I knew I could go in, be happy, and be successful. I also would take a lot of money and I grind it out for 12 months, knowing there was an end date. So I think you've got a lot of choice there.
it's very true. Thank you. And thank you to our audience member. All right, folks. So unfortunately, we are out of time. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us
Sure.
today and
You're
providing our
welcome.
audience your insight on the critical steps for accepting any job offer. Really great. I really loved having you. And thank you to our audience member for tuning in for your great questions as well. We hope you enjoyed and learned a lot from our Job Search in 2023 series hosted or presented by Elizabeth Lyons, and will join us for upcoming webinars in the future. The complete series has been archived in our channels for on-demand access at any time. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channels on social media, and check back daily for future live stream updates. Have a great day, everyone.